Lecture 4: Economic Structures Suited to National Genius. Yesterday, we had discussed the functions of the state in a nation. According to the Bharatiya traditions, a nation is an organic, living entity which has come into existence on its own and has not been made up of or created by any group of persons. A nation brings forth a variety of institutions to fulfill its needs as well as to give concrete shape to its inner fundamental nature. The state is one of these institutions, which, though an important institution, is not supreme. In our literature, wherever the duties of a king are referred to, his importance is definitely recognized. This is so, perhaps, to make him realize his immense responsibility. He exercises tremendous influence on the lives and character of the people. Hence, he has to give due attention to his own behavior. Bhishma has said the same thing in the Mahabharata when he was asked whether circumstances make a king or a king makes the circumstances. He categorically stated that the king shapes the circumstances, or Raja Kalasya Karanam. Now some persons interpreted this to mean that he considered the king above all, but this is not true. He did not suggest that the king was above dharma. It is true that the king wielded a great deal of influence and that he was a protector of dharma in society, but the king could not decide what constitutes dharma. He only saw to it that people led their lives according to dharma. In a way, he was equivalent to the present-day executive. King is not above dharma. In a modern state, the executive has the responsibility to execute laws properly, but it does not enact laws. When the executive does not function with honesty and efficiency, the laws are entirely disregarded, as we may well see around us. And we can well say today, executive is responsible for the present evils to a great extent. After all, why has prohibition failed? Who is responsible for its failure? When those very persons who have been entrusted with the task of implementing prohibition start taking monthly payoffs from the bootleggers, how will the prohibition policy succeed? The executive is therefore responsible for the proper enforcement of law. This is the meaning of Bhishma's statement. It would be a mistake to interpret it as an acceptance of proven supremacy of a king. If this were so, how was it that the tyrant king Vena was removed by the rishis and Prithu enthroned in his place? This action by the rishis was never condemned by anyone in history. On the contrary, it was hailed by everyone. When the supremacy of dharma is accepted as a principle, then through the authority of dharma, the rishis derive a right to remove a king who defaults in his duty. Otherwise, it would have been absolutely illegal to remove a king from his throne. Thus, if a king does not act according to dharma, it becomes the duty of everyone to remove him. In Western countries, either a king was removed by some other king, or people rejected the sovereignty of the king altogether. Their king was a representative of God and could under no circumstances be removed, at least in principle. Autonomous institutions in ancient Bharat. In our socio-political setup, the king and the state were never considered supreme. Not only that, there were other important institutions besides the state to regulate and to help carry on the social life. Those institutions had been organized both on a horizontal and a vertical level, that is, on a regional and occupational basis. We had evolved panchayats and janapadas, sabhas. The mightiest of the kings did not ever disturb the panchayats. Similarly, there were associations on the basis of trade. These too were never disturbed by the state. On the contrary, their autonomy was recognized. They devised their own rules and regulations in their fields. The panchayats of different communities, shrenis, nigams, village panchayats Janapada Sabhas, and other such organizations used to frame their own rules and regulations. The functions of the state were to mostly see that these rules were observed by the persons concerned. The state never interfered with the affairs of these associations. Thus, the state was concerned only with some aspects of the life of the society. Similarly, in the economic field, many other institutions were created. We have to think what should be the nature of our economic structure. We must have such an economic system that helps in the development of our humane qualities or civilization and enables us to attain a still higher level of all-round perfection. We should have a system which does not overwhelm our humane quality, which does not make us slaves of its own grinding wheels. According to our concept, man attains godlike perfection as a result of development. Therefore, we have to devise such an economic system to create such infrastructure and to frame such regulations in which and by which the inherent potentialities of man may find their highest fulfillment. Let us consider this point. Economic system for what? An economic system must achieve the production of all the basic things essential for the maintenance and development of the people, as well as the protection and development of the nation. Having satisfied the basic minimum requirements, the question naturally arises whether there should be more production for greater prosperity and happiness. Western societies consider it most essential and even desirable to go on continuously and systematically increasing the desires and needs of man. There is no upper limit in this context. Normally, desire precedes the effort to produce the things desired. But now the position is reversed. People are induced to desire and use the things that have been or are being produced. Instead of producing to meet the demand, the search is on for the markets for the goods already produced. If the demand does not exist, systematic efforts are made to create demand. This has become the chief characteristic of the Western economic system. Earlier, production followed the demand. Now, demand follows production. Consider the use of tea, for example. Tea was not produced because people desired and wanted it, but tea was produced and we were induced to develop a taste for tea. Now tea is a common man's drink. It has become a part of our life. The case of vegetable ghee is similar. Did anyone ever want to use it? It was first produced and then we were taught to use it. If whatever is manufactured is not consumed, there will be depression. Some of us may remember the Great Depression of 1930 to 32. There was abundance of goods at that time, but there was no demand. Therefore, factories had to be closed down. Bankruptcy and unemployment were widespread. Thus, nowadays, it is most important that what is being produced must be consumed. New demand is located. The editor of Organizer, an English weekly, had gone to the USA for a visit some time ago. Upon his return, he related an interesting instance. There is a factory which produces potato peelers, a device for peeling potatoes. The production of this factory outstripped the demand for the device. The management of the firm faced the problem of finding some way by which people might be induced to buy more potato peelers. They called a meeting of all the salesmen to the firm. Among the suggestions put forward, one was to make the color of the handle similar to that of a potato so that along with the peel, the peeler may also be dumped in the garbage, often by mistake. Thus, there may be greater demand. Also, the product was offered in a more attractive packing. Eco-destructive consumerism. Now, this economic structure is not merely consumption-oriented, but is clearly leading to destruction. Throw away the old one and buy a new one. Rather than satisfying the need and demand of the people, to create fresh demand has become the aim of modern economics. Supposing that we need not worry about the limited supply of natural resources, there is yet the question of balance in nature. There is a cyclic relationship in different parts of nature. If one of the three sticks which stand with mutual support is removed, the other two will automatically fall. The present economic system and system of production are fast disturbing this equilibrium in nature. As a result, on the one hand, new products are manufactured for satisfying ever-increasing desires, and on the other hand, new problems arise every day, threatening the very existence of humanity and civilization. It is essential, therefore, to use up that portion of the available natural resources which nature itself will be able to recoup easily. When the fruits are taken, the fruit tree is not injured. It may even be helpful to the tree. However, in the effort to take greatest harvest from the land, chemical fertilizers are used, which in a few years' time will render the land altogether infertile. Lakhs of acres of land lie barren in America due to this factor. How long can this dance of destruction go on? The industrialist provides for a depreciation fund to replace machines when they are worn out. Then how can we neglect the depreciation fund for nature? From this point of view, it must be realized that the object of our economic system should not be to make extravagant use, but a well-regulated use of available resources. The physical objects necessary for a purposeful, happy, and progressive life must be obtained. The Almighty has provided that much. It will not be wise, however, to engage in a blind rat race of consumption and production as if man is created for the sole purpose of consumption. Engine needs coal for its proper working, but it has not been produced merely to consume coal. On the contrary, it is only proper always to see that with the minimum coal consumption, maximum energy is produced. This is the economic viewpoint. Keeping in view the aim of human life, we must endeavor to see how, with minimum of fuel, man proceeds to his goal with the maximum of speed. Such a system alone can be called civilization. This system will not think of merely a single aspect of human life, but of all its aspects, including the ultimate aim. This system will be constructive rather than destructive. This system will not thrive on the exploitation of nature, but will sustain nature and will in turn itself be nourished. Milking rather than exploitation should be your aim. The system should be such that overflow from nature is used to sustain our lives. Western economic theories. If such a human objective inspires the economic system, then our thinking on the economic questions will undergo thorough transformation. In the Western economies, whether it is capitalist or socialist, value has the most important and central position. All economic theories center around value. It may be that the analysis of value is very important from the point of view of economists, but those social philosophies which are based entirely on value are far more incomplete, inhuman, and to some extent unethical. Take, for example, the slogan commonly heard nowadays, "One must earn his bread." Normally, communists use this slogan, but even the capitalists are not fundamentally in disagreement with it. If there is any difference between them, it is only as regards to who earns and how much. The capitalists consider capital and enterprise as important components of production, and hence, if they take a major share of profits, they think it is their due. On the other hand, communists believe only labor to be the main factor in production. Therefore, they concede major share of the production to the laborers. Neither of these ideas is correct. Basic needs to be met. Really speaking, our slogan should be that the one who earns will feed, and every person will have enough to eat. The right to food is the birthright. The ability to earn is a result of education and training. In a society, even those who do not earn must have food. The children and the old, the diseased and the invalids, all must be cared for by the society. Every society generally fulfills this responsibility. The social and cultural progress of mankind lies in its readiness to fulfill this responsibility. The economic system must provide for this responsibility. The economic system must provide for this task. Economics as a science does not account for this responsibility. A man works not for bread alone, but also to shoulder this responsibility. Otherwise, those who have had their meals would no longer work. Any economic system must provide for the minimum basic necessities of human life to everyone. Food, clothing, and shelter constitute, broadly speaking, these basic necessities. Similarly, societies must enable the individual to carry out his obligations to society by educating him properly. Lastly, in the event of an individual falling prey to any disease, society must arrange for his treatment and maintenance. If a government provides these minimum requirements, then only it is a rule of dharma. Otherwise, it is a rule of adharma. Describing King Dilip, Kalidas has said in Raghuvansha, being responsible for the maintenance, protection, and education of his subjects, he was their true father. Others were merely instrumental in giving them birth. The description of King Bharat, after whom our country has been named Bharat, also runs similarly, that is, by maintaining and protecting his subjects, he was called Bharat. This is his country, Bharat. If in this country maintenance and protection are not guaranteed, then the name Bharat is meaningless. Education, a social responsibility. To educate a child is in the interest of society itself. By birth, a child is an animal. He becomes a responsible member of society only by education and culture. To charge fees for something which is an interest of the society itself is rather odd. If due to their inability to pay the fees, children are left without an education, will the society be able to endure this situation for long? We do not charge fees from trees for sowing the seed and caring for the sapling. On the contrary, we invest our money and efforts. We know that when a tree grows, we shall reap fruits. Education is a similar investment. An educated individual will indeed serve society. On the other hand, it will not be surprising if people grow indifferent to society, which leaves them to fend for themselves. Before 1947, in all the princely states in India, no fees were charged for education. The highest education was free. The gurukuls, even food and lodging were arranged without any charge. The student used to go to society for bhiksha. No householder would refuse bhiksha to the student. In other words, the society used to bear the burden of education. Similarly, it is rather surprising that one has to pay for his medical treatment. In fact, medical treatment also should be free, as it was in this country in the past. Nowadays, one has to pay even to get an entrance to a temple. There is a charge of 25 paise to enter the Balaji temple at Tirupati. However, there is a Dharma Darshan at noon for an hour, during which period the payment of charges is not required. At other times, it is as though a Dharma Darshan, when charges are to be paid. The society should guarantee to all its members minimum requirements for its maintenance and progress of every individual. Now the question arises, if everyone is to be guaranteed the minimum necessities, where will the resources for all this come from? Guarantee of work. It is clear that the resources must be produced by our own efforts. Therefore, where a right to a guaranteed minimum is recognized, any individual who does not share in the efforts to produce is a burden to society. Similarly, Any system which obstructs the production activity of the people is self-destructive. Such a system will not enable individuals to fulfill their responsibilities. Not only that, but even if the requirements of an individual are met, while he does not share in the efforts, his personality will not develop fully and his progress as a human being will be distorted and lopsided. Man has a stomach as well as hands. If he has no work for his hands, he will not get happiness even if he gets food to satisfy his hunger. His progress will be obstructed. Just as a barren woman experiences emptiness in life and consequent dissatisfaction, so does a man without work. The guarantee of work to every able-bodied member of society should be the aim of our economic system. Today, we witness a very strange situation. On the one hand, a 10-year-old child and a 70-year-old man are toiling, and on the other hand, a youth of 25 years is driven to suicide for want of work. We shall have to remove this mismanagement. God has given us hands, but hands by themselves have a limited capacity to produce. They need the assistance of capital in the form of machines. Labor and capital bear the same relation to each other as that between man and nature. The world is a creation of these two. Neither of them can be neglected. Capital formation. For capital formation, it is essential that a part of production be saved from immediate consumption and be used for further production in future. Thus, capital can be formed only by restraint on consumption. This is the basis of capital formation, to which Karl Marx refers to as surplus value in his treatise. In the capitalist system, the industrialist creates capital with the help of this surplus value. In a socialist system, the state undertakes this task. In both the systems, the entire production is not distributed among the workers. If production is carried on through centralized large-scale industries, the sacrifice on the part of the worker in creating the capital is not given due recognition. The advantage in decentralization is in the fact that the worker has a sense of direct participation in the management of the surplus value or capital. Machine and the worker. Machines are the most common form of capital. Machines were created in order to reduce the content of physical labor in production and to increase the productivity of the worker. Machines, therefore, are an assistant of the worker and not his competitor. However, where the human labor came to be considered as a commodity to be purchased with money, the machine became the competitor of the human being. The principal drawback of the capitalist viewpoint lies in the fact that by making the machine a competitor of human labor and thereby displacing and subjecting a human being to privations, the very purpose of creating machines has been defeated. Machines cannot be blamed for this. It is the fault of the economic and social system which cannot distinguish between the object and the instrument. It is only after considering the limitations of the machine that one has to decide upon its usefulness. From this point of view, to import machinery from Western countries where shortage of manpowers was the guiding factor in the design of machines would be a serious mistake. The merits of machines are not independent of time and place. Machines are product of modern science but not its representatives. Scientific knowledge is not a monopoly of any particular country, but its application has to take into account the particular condition of each country and its requirements. Our machines must only be tailored for our specific economic needs, but must also be at least avoid conflict with our socio-political and cultural objectives. The 7 M's. Professor Visvesvaraya has said in one of his books that while considering the system of production, one must take into account the 7 M's. These are man, material, money, management, motive power, market, and machine. The skill and ability of the workers or those who should be provided work must be considered. Easy availability of the required raw material and the quality and properties of the raw material available cannot be ignored. We must also think of how much money is available as capital, how this capital can be increased and at what rate, how can it be utilized for the maximum production, how much of it should be put in fixed assets and how much should be kept in liquid form. We must also pay attention to the forms of power available in the country in addition to human and animal labor. Wind, water, steam, oil, gas, electricity, and atomic power can supply the motive power. Of these, which form of power can be obtained in what quantity without being uneconomic must be thought of while deciding upon our methods of production. In the same way, managerial skills are also important and deserve due attention. If the ability to coordinate the efforts of a dozen workers is wanting, all of them will remain unemployed. It is also necessary to think of the usefulness of the goods produced to the society. This means that production of any particular commodity cannot be justified economically without the consideration of the market it commands. Taking into consideration all these factors, we should design suitable machines. Instead, we find nowadays that we install the machines first and try to coordinate all other factors afterwards. Other countries of the world did not progress in this fashion, otherwise new machines would not have been invented. We are importing the machine and hence we have little knowledge. We shall have to develop a Bharatiya technology. Full employment is a must. None of the 7 factors is unchangeable. In fact, each one keeps constantly changing. Those who are entrusted with the task of planning must think of how the change is directed towards progress, how physical hardship is reduced and waste of energy is minimized. As an illustration, let us take the low productivity of a worker. It can be increased by using machines, and it is necessary to do so, but if the machine is such that it requires only a few men to run it, then the rest of the people will be thrown out of employment. If the machine has to be imported from other countries at such a heavy cost that the additional production it causes will be insufficient to make it economic, then such a machine is not suitable to our requirements. Just as to let the part of the installed capacity of a factory remain unutilized, it is a losing proposition, so also to let the people of this country remain unemployed is a losing proportion. Nay, this is even worse. Whereas a machine eats up only the capital invested in it in the past, the unemployed people have to be fed, which is a continuous and unending drain on resources, consumed at double the speed. Therefore, instead of the usual exhortation of every worker must get food, we must think of everyone who eats must get work as the basis of our economy. No doubt the charkha has to be replaced by the machines, but not necessarily automatic machines everywhere. Full employment must be a primary consideration, and then the rest of the 6 factors suit us. Man's place in the capitalist system. The use of manpower and the employment question will have to be thought of in the context of the human being as a whole, as an integral being. The economic theories of the past few centuries and the structure of the society based on these theories are such that there has been a long, thorough devaluation of the human being. His personality is altogether irrelevant to the economic setup. A capitalist economy recognizes only an economic man whose decisions are all based entirely on calculations of gain and loss in terms of material wealth. For this economic man, 5 rupees are always more than 4 rupees. He works solely to gain more wealth and exerts himself to get maximum gain. For him, just like other commodities, human labor is a commodity to be bought and sold in the market. This is free enterprise. It holds all other restrictions and regulations unjust, save the break of competition. In the race, no one is prepared to stop and give a helping hand to the weak who is left behind. Nay, elimination of weak is considered to be just and natural. It is an uneconomic, marginal unit not fit to exist. This is what it advocates. By the elimination of such marginal units, the economic power accumulates in the hands of a few. This is considered normal and natural in a capitalist system. But when monopoly is established, even the check of competition ceases to operate. In such a situation, the incentive resulting from competition is no longer available. Prices are arbitrarily fixed and the quality of products deteriorates. Even as regards the consumer's needs, the capitalist is guided not by the necessities and desires of the consumer, but by his purchasing power. The needs of the wealthy and well-fed are attended to, rather than those of the poor and the hungry. As a result, where countless varieties of goods are produced for the needs of the wealthy, even the basic necessities of life for the poor become scarce. The centralization and monopolization of production totally undermine the influence of the consumer. The markets are so organized that the consumer has to go for standard products. This standardization is on the increase at such a pace that individual preference of the customer is ignored. Like the books in the library, even human beings are allotted numbers as consumers. The system which boasts of giving highest importance to the individual has ironically destroyed all individuality. Clearly, the capitalist system is incapable of helping the development of an integral human being. Socialist system is a reaction. Socialism arose as a reaction to capitalism. But even socialism failed to establish the importance of a human being. Socialists contented themselves by merely transferring the ownership of capital in the hands of the state. But the state is even more of an impersonal institution. All the business of the state is conducted by rigid rules and regulations. Generally, there is no place for individual discretion, and even where such discretion is allowed, the slightest laxity in the sense of duty and social responsibility on the part of the administrators results in corruption and favoritism. The capitalistic system thought merely of the economic man, but left him free in other fields where he could exercise his individuality. The socialist system went much further and thought only of the abstract man. After that, there was no scope for the development of the individual's personality based on diverse tastes and abilities. The needs and preferences of individuals have as much importance in the socialist system as in prison manual. There is no such thing as individual freedom in the socialist system. There is no private property in a socialist society. This removes the problems accompanying the institution of private property. However, the incentive for production and conservation of resources and economy in utilization accompany the institution of private property. There has been no alternative arrangement to preserve these. The state is made supreme and the sole authority in all the matters. The individual citizen is reduced to a mere cog in this giant wheel. There is no provision to inspire the individual to fulfill his role. As Dayal states, the class of old-fashioned exploiters has been eliminated, but a new class of bureaucratic exploiters has come into existence. Karl Marx put forward in his analysis of history that capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction and that communism is a natural and inevitable successor to capitalism. This concept may be helpful in fostering faith in the communists about their ultimate victory, but certainly such a determinist view destroys the urge for reform and dynamism in man. He is no longer the creator of a new order. He is merely incidental to a predetermined historical process. His task is only to accelerate the process. Therefore, even as he tries to organize workers, he cares little for their welfare, but uses them as mere tools for the revolution. The dialectic materialism of Marx, too, operates only so long as the state is not established as supreme after destroying the capitalists. Thereafter, the state puts a stop to the operation of the principle of dialectic materialism. In the name of crushing the counter-revolutionaries, the state becomes more and more totalitarian. The day when the state is to wither away, yielding place to a stateless society remains a mere dream. In fact, according to the Marxist view, to obstruct the process of this antithesis is in itself reactionary. Marx is thus falsified by his own standards. Alternative to capitalism and socialism. Both these systems, capitalist as well as communists, have failed to take account of the integral man in his true complete personality and his aspirations. One considers him a mere selfish being hankering after money, having only one law, the law of fierce competition, in essence of the law of the jungle, whereas the other has viewed him as a feeble, lifeless cog in the whole scheme of things, regulated by rigid rules and incapable of any good unless directed. The centralization of power, economic and political, is implied in both. Both, therefore, result in the dehumanization of man. Man, the highest creation of God, is losing his own identity. We must re-establish him in his rightful position, bring him to the realization of greatness, reawaken his abilities and encourage him to exert for attaining divine heights of his latent personality. This is possible only through a decentralized economy. We want neither capitalism nor socialism. We aim at the progress and happiness of man, the integral man. The protagonists of the two systems fight with man on the stake. Both of them do not understand man, nor do they care for his interests. Our economic system. The objectives of our economy should be 1. An assurance of the minimum standard of living to every individual and preparedness for the defense of the nation. 2. Further increase above this minimum standard of living, whereby the individual and the nation acquire the means to contribute to world progress on the basis of its own chitti. 3. To provide meaningful employment to every able-bodied citizen, by which the above two objectives can be realized, and to avoid waste and extravagance in the utilization of natural resources. 4. To develop machines suited to Bharatiya conditions, Bharatiya technology, taking note of the availability and nature of the various factors of production, the 7 M's. 5. This system must help and not disregard the human being, the individual. It must protect the culture and other values of life. This is a requirement which cannot be violated except at the risk of great peril. 6. The ownership, state, private or any other form, of various industries must be decided on a pragmatic and practical basis. Swadeshi and decentralization. These are few general directions which we must bear in mind while developing our economy. Swadeshi and decentralization are the two words which can briefly summarize the economic policy suitable for the present circumstances. Centralization and monopolization have been the order of the day for all these years, knowingly or unknowingly. The planners have become prisoners of a belief that only a large-scale, centralized industry is economic, and hence, without worrying about its ill effects, or knowingly but helplessly, they have continued in that direction. The same has been the fate of Swadeshi. The concept of Swadeshi is ridiculed as old-fashioned and reactionary. We proudly use foreign articles. We have grown over-dependent upon foreign aid in everything from thinking, management, capital, methods of production, technology, etc., to even the standards and forms of consumption. This is not the road to progress and development. We will forget our individuality and become virtual slaves once again. The positive content of Swadeshi should be used as the cornerstone of the reconstruction of our economy. Discard status quo mentality. For want of time, I have not touched upon the natural aspects of economic structure, but one thing is clear, that many old institutions will yield place to new ones. This will adversely affect those who have vested interest in the old institutions. Some others who are by nature averse to change will also suffer by efforts of reconstruction. But disease must be treated with medicine. Strength can be gained only from exercise and hard work. Therefore, we shall have to discard the status quo mentality and usher in a new era. Indeed, our efforts of reconstruction need not be clouded by prejudice or disregard for all that is inherited from our past. On the other hand, there is no need to cling to the past institutions and traditions which have outlived their utility. We have considered what the direction of change should be. We have in the last 4 days thought over the integrated form of humanism. On this basis, we shall be able to reconcile nationalism, democracy, socialism, and world peace with the traditional values of Bharatiya culture, and think of all these ideals in an integrated form. The mutual conflict amongst these ideals can be removed and they can be supplemented mutually. Thereby, man can gain his lost status and attain the aims of his life. We have discussed here the philosophy, but the members of Bharatiya Jansangh are not mere philosophers or academicians. We have set out with the determination to make this nation strong, happy, and prosperous through the medium of the Bharatiya Jansangh. Therefore, we must carry on practical programs for the national reconstruction on this foundation. We have taken due note of our ancient culture, but we are not archaeologists. We have no intention to become custodians of a vast archaeological museum. Our goal is not merely to protect the culture, but to revitalize it so as to make it dynamic and in tune with the times. We must ensure that our nation stands firm on this foundation and our society is enabled to live a healthy, progressive, and purposeful life. We shall have to end a number of traditions and set in reforms which are helpful in the development of values and national unity in our society. We shall remove those traditions which obstruct this process. Whereas one need not mourn the limitations of the human body, one must undergo the required surgical operation if any part of the body has a cancerous growth. There is no need to amputate healthy limbs. If today society is gripped with evils like untouchability, which leads men to treat other human beings as lower than themselves, and thereby threaten the national unity, we shall have to end such evils. We shall be required to produce such institutions as will kindle the spirit of action in us, which will replace the self-centeredness and selfishness by a desire to serve the nation, which will produce not only sympathy towards our brethren, but a sense of affection and oneness with them, Such institutions can truly reflect our Chitti. Chitti is a nation's soul. The power that energizes and activates the nation is called Virat, which in turn is aroused and organized and canalized by Chitti. The place of Virat in the life of a nation is similar to that of prana in the body. Just as prana infuses strength in various organs of the body, refreshes the intellect, and keeps body and soul together, so also in a nation with a strong Virat alone can democracy succeed and the government be effective. Then the diversity of our nation does not prove to be an obstacle to our national unity. The differences of language, occupation, etc. are present everywhere. However, when the Virat is awake, diversity does not lead to conflict and people cooperate with one another like the various limbs of the human body or the members of a family. We have to undertake the task of awakening our nation's Virat. Let us start carrying on this task of awakening the Virat of the nation with the high sense of pride in our hoary, glorious past, taking a realistic assessment of the present and having a great ambition for the future. We wish neither to make this country a shadow of some distant past, nor an imitation of Russia or America. With the support of universal knowledge and our heritage, we shall create a Bharat which will excel all its past glories, and will enable every citizen in its fold to develop his manifold latent potentialities and to achieve through these a sense of unity with the entire creation, a state even higher than that of a complete human being. It is a state in which Nar or man becomes Narayan or God. This is the eternal and continuous divine form of our culture. This is our message to the humanity at the crossroads. May God give us the strength to succeed in this task. Delivered on 25th April 1965. Bharat Mata Ki Jai.